Seems like a good connection today, at least from my end.
That's good.
My computer's been acting up all morning, so can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Oh,
Yeah.
loud and clear.
Oh, good. Oh, good. I'm connected. Good.
Okay, good afternoon, directors, staff. Regional District Board meeting for Wednesday, October the 6th. I have confirmation of quorum. Call the meeting to order. Adoption of public agenda.
Move adoption.
Move adoption.
Lee and Evans, thank you.
Second.
No additions, call questions. Anyone opposed?
Mr. Chair, I did have my hand up.
Sorry,
I did
Director
have-
Anderson.
New business, if I might. I'd like to give the board an update on our community ambulance station call yesterday.
Okay,
Yes,
you.
and Mr. Chair, it's Director Lee. I would like to give a brief verbal on the Vancouver Island Regional Library Board as the SRD representative, and I'm sure Director Evans would also like to chip in on that. So if you could put something under new business for a brief verbal on the library.
okay, well, we have correspondence under library now, so I'll just give you time then.
Yeah, just there's front page news today in the Mirror, but I think the board should be apprised of what happened last week.
Yep, thank you.
Just so you know, Director Lee, I did send in the media release, so we can both speak to it, but it is on the agenda.
Correct.
Okay,
Thank you. Okay, so the agenda as amended.
So moved.
Dr. Wally, second by
Davis?
Dr. Davis. Call questions. Anyone opposed? Carried. No petition delegations. Adoption of the minutes for the regular meeting held on September the 8th.
Move adoption.
Wally?
Second, Baker.
Dr. Baker. Any errors, omissions? Call questions. Anyone opposed? Carried. Under F, any business rising from the minutes? Seeing none. Any public considerations? There's no notice of motion. Under my chair's report, I have a couple items here. Just a quick verbal on the UBCM meeting. Honorable Josie Osborne. We have 3 items on the agenda. The Recreate project, where Director Adams, as usual, spoke very well on the project and concerns of not getting funding again, and will reapply again. The universal water metering for Area D, it was a staff thing, so staff just notified that we'd be applying for grants. And the third item was the Rural Northern Communities Grant for Surgeon Arrows, which Director Abrams spoke on a few issues, and thanked him very much that we got a nice big paycheck for that. So that was good. I did have something here on the library, but I'll leave that for the 2 directors for later on. The SRD did recognize the first National Day of Truth and Reconciliation on September 30th. All our buildings were closed and our staff were off. It was nice to support our Indigenous First Nations. That's all I really got. Everybody got an email out, I think it was this morning, Edie, about the Greek seafood meeting. That was yesterday, sorry, 1 day late. So please check your emails on that. They want to have a joint meeting discussion. And that's all I got for Chair's report. So I'll take a motion to receive my verbal report.
move receipt.
Director Lee,
Second.
Director Wally, thank you. Call questions, anyone opposed? Seeing none, carried. Calendar, committee chair reports, Electoral Area Service Committee. Draft minutes for the regular meeting held September 8th to be received.
Move receipt.
So moved.
Director
Second.
Wally, Director Abram. Any errors, omissions? Seeing none, I'll call questions. Anyone opposed? Seeing none, carried. Item 2, Strathcona Gardens Commission. Draft minutes for
Move
regular
receipt.
meeting September 8th. Director Lee. Seconder.
Second, Director Evans.
Director Evans, thank you. Any errors, omissions? Seeing none, I'll call questions. Anyone opposed? Seeing none, carried. No external reports. Under staff reports, agricultural land reserve application, Shelter Point Farms, motion receive report from the CAO.
Move receipt, and this application's in Area D.
Thank you, Director
Second.
Lee. Director Wally, thank you. On receipt. Any questions
I have some questions for staff.
Uh,
on receipt?
Miss-
I'll go to the
Yeah,
CAO
well,
first.
just on the report,
Okay.
after you receive.
Okay, so let's go
So-
to the CAO first.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think Annika will speak to this.
Thank you through the chair to the board. The SRD has received an application through the Agricultural Land Commission for a non-farm use for actually two facilities that are currently operating at Shelter Point Farms, one of those being a sea salt production facility and the other being a seaweed processing facility. The Island Sea Salt facility has been operating since 2017, and the Ocean Regenerative Aquaculture has been operating since June 2021. Both of these facilities operate beside one another and are integral components of what is now being called an overall full agricultural operation intended for the lands, where the full focus of the lands are on strict sustainable agriculture and food security. The area zoning bylaw zones this land as rural 1, and it does permit agricultural uses. However, at this time, these uses have not been deemed as agricultural uses by the Agricultural Land Commission. So although what we would assume is compatible with the SRD zoning, neither of these are currently permitted as non-farm uses with the ALC, and that is why we are considering this application today. We referred this application out to the Ministry of Agriculture, and they have no concerns with this proposal, given the fact that it doesn't increase any building footprints, it's small scale, and if anything is actually producing multiple agricultural products and therefore increasing the net agricultural capability of the lands. Given the above, we are asking that the board authorize that the application proceed to the ALC for its consideration. Thank you.
Okay, and Director Lee, you had a question?
Thank you. Well, my comments are that this is not an agricultural operation. This is producing food, but under our zoning bylaws, this would be more of an industrial activity that's happening in those barns. And it's been happening for a while without any the first time I heard of it was when it popped up on this report. Annika says it's been going since 2017. I don't know where, but, Area D certainly wasn't apprised of that. And we just shut down an industrial operation across the street from this operation, which was denied after a public hearing in the neighborhood. So what concerns me is that the agricultural operations, which relate to growing food at the farm site and farming that land, it's restricted to not bringing in more than 50% of its final product from off-site, which this is doing. These are just corporations that it seems the farmer has leased out to corporations that aren't in Area D, that emanate from Port Hardy and other places. I think it's an industrial operation, and my question is, will we be reviewing the zoning for this? And why would the regional district be indicating to the ALR that they support the application when we only just found out about it? We don't know anything about it. As far as new buildings go, there's been a couple new little buildings go up in the past few weeks, I've noticed. There's huge boom trucks moving around the site.
Okay, Director Lee, we're still on receipt.
It's not something that, in absence of proper zoning, that I could support recommending at this time.
Okay, we're still on receipt, Director Lee. So your question was
Okay.
supposed to be on the report.
Yeah, on the report from Monaco, she says it's all hunky-dory, it's all farm product, but it's not farm product from that farm. And that's what it's supposed to be. So anything else production-wise is coming from off-site, and it's not within our bylaws.
Thank you.
Board Lawson.
Thank you, through the chair to Director Lee. The Ministry of Agriculture letter and conversations with SRD staff indicates that in fact these operations are supporting agriculture. They are producing agricultural products. The Island Sea Salt is actually pulling salt from the foreshore, from the Shelter Point Farm lands, and materials that are produced through both of these activities are being used both on and off site through both the distillery and some of the products that are coming off the distillery lands. Conversations with the Agricultural Land Reserve appear also to be supportive. However, at this time, given the fact that these aren't included as farm uses in the current legislation, they are tied to going through this process. The SRD review of the zoning indicates that there is nothing within the current operations that goes against the current zoning, and it has not been deemed that there is a compliance issue at this time, especially given the information received from both the Ministry of Agriculture and the Agricultural Land Commission. We feel it appropriate at this time to put this in the hands of the ALC, who are the experts on this legislation, for their determination. I may also add that the structures that are currently being used for both of these operations are existing buildings, and therefore the footprints are not being increased as part of either of these applications.
When you say you've got a letter from the ALC, I didn't see that in the agenda. Is that the local agriculturalist, or is that from the actual ALC, Agricultural Land Commission? Is it from the Courtney office, or is it from the ALC? So why are we going through this process if they've already indicated?
Thank you, through the chair. The formal letter that we've received is from the Ministry of Agriculture, Fisheries and Food, MAF, from a representative, Reed Bailey, who's part of their Strengthening Farms program. I'm not sure it was supposed to be included as part of this application. I'm not certain
So
that
it was not from the ALC. So I would approve of the recommendation to send this to the Agricultural Land Commission for their consideration regarding the non-farm use, but
Director
I
Lee,
don't think that
Director Lee,
this board should be recommending approval at this time.
True.
We should just send it through and let them make the decision on the farm use.
True. Director Abram, do you have a question on the report?
Two quick points. Number one, this has been happening since 2017, according to Anaco. And the comment that was just made in the explanation was that the water is being brought in from the foreshore. So has there been in the past an application for a linear tenure to put that pipe in that would be extracting the water from the ocean to bring it to the desalination plant? Because that would certainly have been a requirement. And I'd like to know if, first of all, if that did happen,
Okay,
and if
so,
it did, when. That's the question.
okay, so
And the other,
let's go do one at a time, Director Abram. So let's go to Ms. Nelson, go ahead.
Thank you, through the chair to the board. Yes, in fact, Island Sea Salt is currently operating under a DFO license to extract seawater at their current location, and their application with Flinro is currently under consideration. Flinro is severely backed up at this time.
Okay, thank you. And your other question, Director Abram?
well, just on that one, so then the Flinro application has not been finalized as far as linear tenure over the land underwater. that's what I got from what Annika just said. The other part of it was on, I see some conflict here in what's been said, and that is that if our bylaw says that only 50% of the product can come from off-site and 100% of the product, which is the kelp, is coming from off-site, then how do we reconcile that?
Aniko?
Thank you to the chair. In fact, our SRD bylaw, zoning bylaw does not indicate that. I believe Director Lee is quoting some of the legislation of the Agricultural Land Commission. So as stated previously, at this time, there is no compliance issues with respect to the information we have on either of the operations as per our zoning.
Okay.
And if I
Okay.
also just make clarify, the recommendation being put forward from staff is that the application be forwarded to the ALC for their consideration. The recommendation is not that we support or approve at this time. Thank you.
Gil?
Thank you. When we received it, I'd like to make a subsequent motion, please.
Okay. Okay, I'm gonna call question on receipt. Is anyone opposed? I don't see any. Carried. Item B.
So I'd like to move item B down to the end of the date at the last line of the first paragraph, so that we send this for consideration by the ALC. But as Aniko just finished saying, we're not recommending approval yet. Like, we're letting them make that decision. So I'd like it to end at the words September 21st, 2021, period.
Do I have a seconder?
Second.
Okay.
Okay, any discussion?
If I may, Mr. Chair?
Go ahead.
Yeah, just real quick, I think that's appropriate, except in previous applications, we have said that the application not be recommended, or that there be no recommendation. So actually, there probably should be an addition after the period that says that there is no recommendation, so that we're clear.
Is that a motion?
Sure, I'll make that as an amendment to that
Amendment?
motion.
Okay, so your amendment is that the application would be no recommendation at this time.
Yes, that there be no recommendation
Do I have a
at
seconder?
this time.
Second.
Cool. Director Kerr.
Thank you, Chair. And I definitely don't understand why the electoral areas are so opposed to this. Why would you not bend over backwards to support this small business? I mean, this is only going to serve to make their agricultural business more viable, especially in these times when they're faced with the heavy challenge of COVID and the economy right now. It's absurd to me to have this kind of reaction to something like this, and I certainly will not support no approval. I think this should go ahead, and that we should be fully behind it. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Abram, is your hand still up or is it up again?
No, it's new.
Okay, go ahead.
I totally concur with Director Kerr that we should be supporting these types of applications. The point I was bringing up was a procedural point on whether we recommend, not recommend, or deny. And I am certainly not saying deny, but I'm falling back on just a couple of meetings ago, we had a 4-lot subdivision on Quadra Island, 4 10-acre lots of ALR land that were being subdivided for the purpose of small farms for 4 families that were ready to move on to those properties to farm them. And the recommendation that we sent forward was that we did not agree that our application was that we not recommend it. Although it met the bylaws, it met everything, all the boxes were ticked, but yet we recommended to not approve it to the ALC. Now, it's still up to them what they do with it, but that's what happened. And, you know, I was very concerned at that time, and I think we should be supporting things like what is happening right here. These kelp farms are being talked about constantly in the offshore processes that I'm involved in. They are the new up and coming aquaculture to, you know, allow for mariculture.
Okay.
So I'm just trying to be consistent, that's all.
Okay, thank you. Director Lee?
Yes, and I'd just like to say that I am not against the Agricultural Land Commission considering this application. And I think Director Kerr's comments were a little misguided in that the electoral areas are not saying we're against this operation or what they're doing. We are just asking the ALC to evaluate the application as to its impact on the farm. This farm is a valuable farm. It's Class 2 soils, very highly valued farming area. We want to make sure that the ALC looks at it and makes sure that it is not going to harm the soils and those things that the ALC are experts on. I'm not a soil expert. I don't want to comment on whether this application should be recommended because that's what they're looking at when they look at a non-farm use application. They're looking at how it affects the farm in the long run. So I don't think that any of us are qualified to make a recommendation on that. And once it comes back, then if there's zoning issues or whatever, we can deal with them later.
Okay, thank you, Director Lee. And to wrap it up, I got Director Anderson.
Thank you. I remember representatives from the ALC coming to speak with the board a few years back and all but begging of us to actually make recommendations when we forward things on to them, either support or not support, but not these non-committal recommendations, because it's what they said is it's really of value to them to know the regional district's perspective, those of us who are on the ground, who know these operations, who know the associated land uses, etc. And that clearly we're not farm experts, and that's why we refer it on to them, and it's ultimately their decision, but that they really did want our input as to, is it appropriate generally in our community? Is it appropriate land use generally in our community? So I think that if we have a view on this, now I don't know this area, you know, hardly at all. I've been on site, but not an expert in the slightest, but those of you who do, I would suggest that if we vote this amendment down, we could indeed put an amendment forward that recommended approval. I think that that is indeed what the commission has been asking us to do.
Thank you. And I've got Director Kerr.
Thank you. I just was going to request that we have the amendment read out and so that we're clear about what we're voting on. Thanks.
Thank you. So we'll vote on the amendment, and the amendment stated, correct me if I'm wrong, that the application.
There's no amendment. There's simply a motion of B without the last paragraph. It's not an amendment. The amendment is everything that's in B, ending with the words September 21st, 2021.
No, I'll go to
No,
Mr. Yates.
That's not an amendment.
I made
Director
an
Abram
amendment.
then offered an amendment.
Which was?
Hang on,
Mr. Chair, would
Mr.
you
Yates,
like me to clarify, Mr. Chairman?
please.
There was an amendment to the motion made by Director Lee, that was made by Director Abram, that the regional district not include a recommendation with this application. That was the amendment that is currently being debated.
I apologize. I didn't hear that part. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. So on the amendment, is anyone opposed?
Kerr
Council
opposed.
Moglove, I'm opposed.
Kerr, Moglove,
Evans is opposed.
Evans,
Evans?
Anderson,
Dahl,
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 I think
Baker.
Colburn is opposed. Not
Baker.
sure, but
I got Kerr, Moglove, Evans, Anderson, Dahl, Baker, Colburn. Unger's opposed. Therefore, it's defeated. Back to the main motion. Call questions. Anyone opposed?
hold on. I would like to offer a different amendment unless somebody else wanted to.
Go ahead.
we could do it as a subsequent, Nova.
Subsequent.
At the pleasure of the chair.
Let's go with the amendment. Go ahead.
Simply what's on our screen and that the application be recommended for approval, that be the amendment.
Okay.
Second.
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 Director Anderson
That's
and
on the
Director
screen.
Kerr. Any discussion? I'll call question. Is anyone opposed?
Lee,
Lee? Hearing none. Approved. Back to the main motion. Call question. Anyone opposed? Carried. Thank you. On to item number 2, Salmon White River floodplain modernization. Motion to receive the report from the CAO.
move receipt.
Director Wally,
Second,
second
Abram.
Director Abram, and I'll go to the CAO.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I believe we have a staff member from McElhaney that will present this for us.
Excellent, thank you. Go ahead, Mr. DeGagne.
Hello, everybody. So we have prepared and we're at the draft stage of the report that we were commissioned to, which is the modernization of the floodplain mapping in the Sayward Valley, which includes the Salmon River and the White River, up to the Big Tree Main, to the mouth of the Salmon River in Kelsey Bay. Since you're just receiving the report, probably haven't not had a chance to really breeze through it. In summation, the report is an update from the 1980 mapping, which was again looked at in the early 90s, so about 30 years ago. And we have updated all of the hydrologic forecasts to the year 2021, as well as looking into the future to the year 2100 with respect to expected or estimated climate change effects like sea level rise and an increase in seasonal precipitation, which is likely to affect flooding in the valley. To keep it short and sweet, really there has not been a dramatic change in the conclusions with respect to flooding in the valley. Those citizens that have lived in the valley for a long time are aware of frequent overbank flooding to certain levels. The levels that we are predicting at the 1 in 200 year flood return period, which is substantially larger than any flood that we have looked at in the recent past. For instance, in 2019, there was a flood that was about 1,150 cubic meters per second at the bridge of the highway on the river system. And the 1 in 200 year flood is around 2,083 cubic meters per second. So almost double, we're talking about almost double the last sort of major event that happened in the valley. Which is equal to the estimates that they were using in the 80s and 90s as flooding. And there's a couple of reasons for this. We have a lot more data since then. And the Salmon River diversion structure at the upriver about 30 kilometers has been decommissioned. So what was normally diverted before to the Campbell River system was about 150 cubic meters at peak flow, is now all going down the river. So although the last 30 years of data would indicate that there's a bit of a reduction in flow in the Salmon River, the increase of that 150 cubic meters or so actually makes it about the same. So when we run the models, which we've created out of the most recent data we have in terms of topography and bridge structures and all that kind of good stuff, we see widespread, extensive flooding throughout the valley, including the main road into Sayward and a small portion, approximately, what's my number here? Approximately 1.2 kilometers on the Salmon River main, which is on the north side of the river. The village itself is primarily, the core part of the village itself is primarily above flood levels. And those residents between the core village and the highway would experience quite significant flooding in an event, if it were to happen next year, sort of thing. With respect to the year 2100, sea level rise is estimated to be 1 meter on average, using the median sort of forecast for climate change. But many of you may know that the island is also rising as a result of isostatic rebound from the last ice age, and still rising. So they're predicting about 27 centimeters of rising. So the net effect of sea level rise at Kelsey Bay would be about 0.7 meters, or about 2.5 feet, if you're still thinking in the imperial system. With that scenario, what simply happens is the valley from about the mouth to the just upstream of the bridge at the Cable Restaurant, which is the first bridge from the highway, the trestle bridge, simply floods a lot more, 0.71 meters more. The duration of flooding is a little longer, but not much. And the main conclusion is that the valley is still at risk and will be at risk as long as the water flows in the river. Some of the other conclusions in our draft report include 5 options for improving access and egress to the valley and the village itself, because it's the key concern that we heard in our 2 public reviews that we had with the area director and village council, as well as area residents, plus the work we did back in 2019 with flood risks assessment was an initial phase previous to this study. And the number 1 concern is, how do we get out of our properties if the roads are all flooded and it's an emergency? So option A would be to raise the highway. Highway 19 floods moderately, quite moderately, a couple of inches to a foot in some areas. To raise it between the junction of Sayward Road and the bridge at a cost of about $2.4 million, which would include the necessity to provide a relief route for overland flow originating from the south side of the highway, the upstream side, to the north side. What happens is, naturally at the bridge location where the 2 rivers come together, that creates a restriction, and that backs up water throughout the whole valley, and then it overtops the road. So if we can add large diameter culverts, for instance, at the higher levels, so that the larger flood doesn't create any more flooding, then we raise the road slightly. That's what that $2.4 million includes. 2.3, sorry. 2.4. And then the option B would be to raise the Salmon River main in the section that floods north of the river. It's about 1.1 kilometers long. That's about $1 million. Option C would be to raise the Salmon River Road near Hammond Bridge. So that would be from the bridge to the location where it comes towards the village. So northward towards the village where it intersects the Forest Service Road. And that's about $815,000. It's quite a short section, and it would provide anybody between the Hammond Road Bridge and the village with a means of access. You drive towards the village and then out along the FSR to the highway. And then option D and E are to raise the Salmon River Road, which is an MOT road, by the way, to allow access for all the rest of the residents to get out of the harm's way during a flood event more readily. And it's more on an emergency basis because the flood event usually isn't significantly prolonged. Those two options are considerably more money. The first one to do the section of the Salmon River Road or the Sayward Road between the Hammond Bridge and the Cable Restaurant Bridge, the Bailey Bridge, is about 5.1 million, and the Salmon Road north of the highway to the first bridge, the Bailey Bridge, is about $1.75 million. There's a couple things that we have yet to do to finalize the report. One, and most importantly, is to gain some feedback from area directors and you folks. So by all means, any comments you have, we're welcome to receive at this time. And the second thing is that we have a couple of technical things we want to look at. One is the bridge clearances. We have not done a thorough job of that yet. We do believe that most of the bridges, especially the highway bridge on the Highway 19 and the newer bridge closer to the village, are appropriately designed and above the flood harm's way. And the one concern that we have, and we need to take a little closer look at, is the Bailey Bridge, as it only has one pier and it is an older structure of one lane. So that would be something we are going to look at once we receive the comments and can finalize the project.
Okay, so,
And,
sorry, go ahead. I was just gonna say, so really the final report is yet to come.
that's correct. This is purely a draft.
Okay.
And we have to schedule one more public meeting to get this, to get any more feedback on some of the initial results, some of the initial mapping that we have done. So we've updated all the maps in a digital format to new standards. But I don't think there's going to be any alarm bells because they look remarkably like the old maps,
Okay,
as would be expected.
super. Okay, I do have a couple questions here. I've got Director Wally, Director Abram had his hand up, and Director Lee. So Director Wally, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, I got three comments I'd like to make here. First of all, we've had several flood events, as you mentioned, since 1975, but really the only major flood event was in 75. The ones that followed later are kind of more typical for the Sayward Valley and not that great a concern. Now, the Campbell River diversion that has been recently shut down that you mentioned really doesn't make any difference whatsoever. And the reason for that is, in the past, whenever water levels would rise, the Campbell River water system would fill. And just about the time as the flood was beginning to peak, Hydro would shut that diversion down anyway. So we'd get kind of a massive surge that comes down, which doesn't happen now. So it's beneficial for us actually not to have that diversion. And in effect, it doesn't affect the water flows at all, because when they were taking the water out, the water levels were generally quite low. The recommendation you have to raise that section of the Sayward Road between the last bridge closest to the village and heading north towards Frenchman's Road, that's a major concern for me. And the reason for that is, in the past, like in the 75 flood, that road wasn't elevated as it is now. When they put in the new bridge, they built that long, basically it amounts to a dike. So what used to be a relief route for all the water would flow across that land from the old school. Now it can't do that, and it'll be backed up by that thing. Now, if we raise that road even more, it's going to even worsen that situation. So I believe what would need to be done there is to have massive culverts placed under that road. And then if it was raised, it wouldn't make any difference. But as it is now, the capacity of water to flow under the bridge is greatly reduced to what it used to be in the past when it would flow over that road. So that would be a problem just to raise the road without having some massive relief route there. And it would immediately affect those homes that are just adjacent to that dike upstream. Another thing that I noticed your report didn't address is the current. There is quite a few places in the valley that flood with water backing up, but there's no real current that's a concern. But other areas, there's a very swift current that will carry debris and potentially buildings away with it. So it would be significant if it was possible to map which areas are going to have strong current, and local knowledge would know that, and which ones aren't. And then the one other point I would like to make is in your recommendation, you had mentioned potentials for legislation. Legislation isn't going to cut it in Area A, but what would be important would be education for residents. And I think your mapping will help provide that. But one thing that is really lacking is the province needs to require realtors to disclose flood hazards when they list properties, because many people come and go these days buying property and selling again, and they don't realize that they're on a floodplain. And someone who's only been here a few years say, oh yeah, it's just a 200-year flood event, that's not a problem, where it is a problem. And even in a minor flood, some of the buildings that are going up now are in a serious situation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Director Raleigh. And Director Abram.
No, I'm good, thanks.
Okay, Director Lee.
Thank you. I think the report's great in highlighting the need for planners, land use planners, and to be aware, and people who are building in the Sayward Valley, and to be aware of this potential danger to rising waters. However, that road to Sayward, I traveled on it to open the new Sayward Library in December 2019, and it was like the King's Road. It was beautiful. It's brand new, paved, beautiful. So I don't agree that, doing anything more to the roads, unless the Ministry of Highways is going to pay for it, is a great idea. I don't think that's a great idea because, there's around 800 and some odd people in the valley and 400 in the village, and you're going to throw millions and millions of dollars at this. If I lived up there, I'd just say, give me my share of the money and I'll go away and have a good life somewhere else. So I just don't agree with spending that kind of money on a brand new road that's just been repaved and is beautiful. Unless Highways wants to do that, or Highways wants to install big culverts, as Director Wally mentioned. And Director Wally knows way more about water levels than I do. When I traveled in December 2019, though, I went across one wooden bridge, went across about 3 or 4 bridges, and one of the bridges had water coming up within a foot or two of the bottom of the bridge. So it was pretty interesting traveling up there in the winter.
Okay, thank you. Director Baker.
I agree with Director Lee that it is a beautiful road. It's beautiful until it floods. So regardless on how many people live here in the valley and in the village, I think it would be remiss on our part not to be able to deal with that road and the flooding, because it also affects our emergency services. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. Don't see any other questions, so I'll
Could I make one more comment, Mr. Chair?
Director Wally, go ahead.
Thank you. Just in response to Director Baker, there's comment kind of rang a bell. The road to improve first would be Salmon River Mainline, the logging road. That water that floods there doesn't really affect any homes if it was cut off, because it only goes across a very short distance there, and the volumes aren't that great. That would be an easy one for the village to escape on, and it would be an easy one to build up.
Great, thank you. So I'll call question on received report. Is anyone opposed? Seen none, carried. Thank you, Mr. Degagne, and we look forward to the final report.
Well, thank you, and I take your comments with great enthusiasm. And Director Wally, I understand fully what you're talking about with the relief culverts. If any of you have ever driven over the new Huntledge River, the Solom River Bridge on Piercy Road, you'll see that on one side of the bridge there's about 9 large culverts. Those are the sort of things that you're talking about in order to relieve that damming effect of the road raising. So those are in our estimates.
Okay.
And they would have to be proved out at a future, detailed assessment, which is part of the recommendations. But the ideas presented here are at a very high level based on some of the initial results that we have. So thank you, and we'll look forward to arranging the public meeting with Sean and the rest of the folks there at the SRD and the village, and we will talk to you very soon.
Great.
Take care.
Thank you. Moving on, number 3, Northwest Vancouver Island Sami Mapping Project. Motion to receive the report.
Move receipt.
Dr. Wally, seconder.
Second,
Director
Evans.
Colburn, thank you. And I'll go to CAO.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and Sean will speak to this.
Good afternoon, regional boards. So through the chair, very excited to announce that phase 1 of this project is wrapping up, and we now understand the tsunami risk of many of our West Coast communities between the Cayuga-Checklasset First Nation and Tassis area, which was where high-level inundation modeling for phase 1 was focused. Very excited that a media release will be coming out later today, linking people to the website where they can see these maps. And for some of the West Coast directors online, hope to see you out between October 18th and 22nd, because I'll be on the road bringing these maps to the communities, and we have public engagement sessions in Hoopsitas, Walters Island, Ukluchi, Zabalos, Esperanza, and Tassis in that time. And the rest of the report explains the phase 2 project, which is funded by a philanthropist, which will start in the new year. I'm open to any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Coopman. Any questions? Director Davis.
Yeah, thanks for that, Sean. I just wanted to ask, in the study, have they taken into account local conditions in Tassis? I know I've had conversations with you about this before in terms of local tsunami hazards.
So through the chair to Director Davis, if you're referring to the local conditions such as the effect of landslides, no, that has not been taken into account.
Okay, and that includes subsidence of deltas such as Soleneros, or?
Correct, not taken into account.
Okay, will they be, or? Because I think that's of greater concern to villagers in Tassis than tsunamis coming from offshore, because we're quite well protected from that.
So through Director Davis to the chair, if there is future flood planning grants available, that could definitely be applied for as a model to be studied.
Okay, thank you.
Excellent, thank you. I don't see any further questions, so I'll call question. Is anyone opposed? Seeing none, carried. Item 4, Community Resilience Investment Grant Opportunity. Motion to receive the report from the CAO.
Move receipt.
Dr. Wally. Seconder.
Second.
Director Lee. And I'll go to CAO.
Nothing to add, Mr. Chair.
Okay. On receipt, I'll call questions. Anyone opposed? Seeing none, carried. And item B, the application for the 2022 Community Resiliency Investment Grant program be submitted for fire smart activities in the electoral areas outlined in the September 3rd, 2021 report from the CEO, and that regional district commit to overall grant management of the application.
So
Move
moved.
B.
Move, David.
It was Davis and Wally. Any discussion? Seeing none, I'll call questions. Anyone opposed? Seeing none, carried. Item 5, Cortez Island Superior Tank Shuttle Service Study. Motion to receive the report.
Move receipt.
Director Wally, Director Anderson seconded, and the CEO.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I believe Tom will speak to this for us.
Go.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So this report comes to the board after having been reviewed by the Electoral Area Services Committee, and I'm just going to pull up the report itself on the screen. There was a recommendation from the committee that that staff and the director schedule further meetings with the fire department to talk about the study. So the report basically outlined some options, including that particular one or variation of it. But staff are not really of the opinion that there's really much that they can offer. They've been in constant communication and consultation with the fire department over this whole study from day one, which is not to minimize if the director wishes to have those discussions, that's perfectly fine. So the board can really either at this point move forward with a further detailed report from staff, or to not do that and await further information from the fire department presumably, or to postpone this and to allow the director to have additional discussions. And those are the options being presented at this time for the board's consideration. Thank you.
Do you have any questions? Director Anderson.
Thank you. I would really like the motion that the committee supported to be supported by the board, and this is why. Certainly there has been communication between staff and the chief and sounds like the president of the fire department board. But when I brought this to the attention of the president of the board, just before our last meeting, he had indicated that the board had not discussed the report that had been forwarded to the board, but the board had not had it on an agenda or discussed it in any substantive way. And I certainly sent him the report that was on the agenda, and he was going to forward it around again. The reason that I would really like all three parties there, staff from both staff from the SRD and the board and myself, is that because the recommendation that's before, or the report that's before you, has all kinds of recommendations about how to improve the service. And those are great, and many of them are highly valuable to do, but a lot of them have already been undertaken, or the fire department is already in the midst of undertaking them or has plans to undertake them. So what I do not yet understand is the relationship between what CIFA as a separate nonprofit organization is undertaking on their own, quite irrespective of SRD funding, and the things that the SRD would be willing to fund. It has been unclear to me whether the SRD is indeed willing to fund water tanks, for instance. That is something that would be highly valuable that CIFA has wanted to do. It's never come up in budget discussions that we would fund. If we would, that would be fantastic. So in order to have this discussion in a timely manner so that we can then input early into the budget process, it seems much more effective to have all those parties at the table to discuss who might do what in this report, or who's already doing what, versus me meeting with them and then me coming back to staff and then me going back to them, because I would like to bring forward recommendations in the budget process that speak to how the SRD can be proactive in implementing some of these recommendations, and not duplicate or overlap or make redundant the efforts CIFA is already making. So after receipt, respectfully, one, or I don't know, maybe one later, but I do think the board needs some further information at this time. Okay. So I would like to make the recommendation that committee made.
Okay, thank you. After receipt, we will. Mr. Leach.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, I mean, I'm not sure who Director Anderson refers to when she says the SRD willing to fund. Like, staff don't fund things. The board makes decisions on funding opportunities. So, I just get the sense that I don't understand why this conversation or these discussions isn't happening at committee or board for all directors to discuss, because staff don't represent the SRD. And I'm not sure what decisions we would make, because we don't have the authority to make those decisions. And so I'm confused as to what would be the advantage of having a meeting with the fire department, the individual director and staff, and then bringing those back to the committee when, like, how is the committee going to make decisions on, discussions that we've had? I'm just a little confused about it. I'm not sure what Director Anderson is hoping to get out of this discussion. A recommendation back to committee? I'm not sure.
I would happily clarify.
Go ahead.
With permission of the chair. Yeah, no, clearly any decision is decision of the board, but those come with recommendations from staff about what is in our purchasing policy, what is within the establishment bylaw, what is appropriate to fund in a service, what's not. If it's property of CIFA, if it's property of us, it's property of us put on CIFA's land. I don't think the full board needs to engage in that level of discussion initially. I think what would be super valuable is to have staff there, absolutely, as you say, Mr. Leach, not to make decisions that would be entirely inappropriate. I completely concur with you, but rather to be resource people to discuss what is possible, so that I can then, as director for the area, in budget discussions, bring forward recommendations about how to implement the good work that the SRD has done in this planning document. It has not historically been uncommon for the director for an area and a staff member to meet with people on in their respective communities. It's not about trying to usurp the board or make decisions that aren't absolutely the full weight of the board to make. But we don't have detailed discussions between what CIFA is doing, what the board can do here at the board table. It's just a level of detail that would not be appropriate. So I would really love a bit of staff's wisdom at the table so that staff and the board of CIFA and I can look at who could implement what, so that this report doesn't go in the garbage. Because at this point, I can't take further action on this report because so much of it's already either being implemented or planned to be implemented or not appealing to CIFA. And I would like to find a way of implementing it as much as possible. And we have a complete partnership with CIFA in order to deliver these services. So it astounds me that there wouldn't be a willingness or even an initial appetite to do this. I'm saddened that it needs to come to this, that I need to ask for it and then I need to push back against it at the board. I would love to be able to just have this good information, a month or so ago. Hope that clarifies.
Okay, so Director Anderson, I would say you're looking at option one then. Okay, so is there anything else on receipt?
That's not correct, Mr. Chair.
On receipt, I'll call question on receipt. Is anyone opposed? Seeing none, carried. Do I have a subsequent?
I would like to move what the committee passed on September 8th, and that's that the report be referred to CIFA board for a joint discussion between them, SRD staff, and the director for the area.
Do I have a seconder?
Second.
And speaking briefly to that, I would love to get to a point where at the next meeting I am supporting option one or some subset thereof such that we can implement this work. Because at this point, a further detailed report that looks at implementing a bunch of things CIFA is already implementing would just not be a good use of our time. And I would love to be able to bring back some really concrete next steps that would work for both organizations and indeed the communities we serve. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Director Anderson. Okay, I'll call question on the motion. Is anyone opposed?
What's the motion? What motion?
Edie's putting it up right now.
It's the motion that was passed at committee, Director Lee.
Okay.
that this report be referred to the Cortez Island Firefighting Association Board and joint discussion between them, SRD staff, and the director of the area. Moved and seconded. Calling question. Is anyone opposed?
Director Lee has a question.
Director Lee, have a
Yeah.
question on the motion?
The more I hear from Director Anderson on this, the less that I think it's a good idea, this motion, because my experience with volunteer fire departments, and I've got the Black Creek Oyster Bay, the Oyster River Fire Department in my area, is that the fire chief and their organization come up with their operational cost proposals, and they submit them to the Black Creek Oyster Bay Committee, and then we either finance them or not. But the directors don't really get into the weeds about questioning them about, do you really need that, piece of equipment? Or if they tell us that they voted that they do need the equipment, then they come with a proposal to the regional board, the Comox Valley, and we consider it. But we don't help them. We don't get into the weeds talking about operational issues. We let them do those. So this sounds like we're getting a little bit too involved in the details and the operational details of how this would roll out, just for the sake of getting a budget number. You should just tell them you want a budget number by a certain date and what they want it for.
Okay, thank you. Director Anderson.
I appreciate Director Lee's caution, and I certainly don't want to get involved in the weeds of their budget. That's not what I'm talking about. There's an interjurisdictionality nature of this, and one of the recommendations in this report is in fact sort of a whole governance review of things, which is a whole other can of worms, because it speaks to who owns what equipment. If it's on, because the CIFA, you see, CIFA owns the land that the fire halls sit on. They own the fire halls. They own a bunch of equipment. The regional district has insurance. The regional district owns the fire trucks. So it's very much a collaborative service that gets delivered. And this report is speaking to a number of different things we could do to improve the service. And so what needs to be discussed in my summation is not in the weeds about whether we should or shouldn't do some particular item, but rather how to best deliver them. And if we just get a further report issued that speaks about how to implement everything in the existing report, a bunch of it's going to be redundant work. And so I'm just trying to get clear of which organization can deliver what. So if this isn't supported, I would ask that you give me a couple weeks and I'll go have that meeting without the support that I'm asking for.
Okay, thank you. Don't see any speakers. Going to call question on the motion. Anyone opposed? See none, carried. Cool. Item 6, fire service review, electoral area D. Motion to receive the report from the CEO.
Move receipt of report. Move receipt.
Director Lee.
Second.
Director Wally. Anything to add, CAO?
Nothing to add, Mr. Chair.
Cool. Question on receipt. Anyone opposed? See none, carried. And item B, the discussion is being initiated by the City of Camp River to update the electoral area D fire protection agreement, and that a further report be prepared to update the board on the outcome of those discussions. Need a mover?
I'll move B.
Director Molnar, seconder.
Second.
Director Wally. Any discussion?
Yes, I have a question.
Go ahead.
So subsequent to the last discussion, I don't know why the director for Area D is not involved in hearing what's happening on these discussions and looking at any possible alternatives to keeping it, keeping it reasonable and keeping it affordable. I know Black Creek Oyster Bay has just extended its service to help create a new fire hall at Merville and also on Mount Washington. So those are almost complete. There could be some capacity with other, with Black Creek Oyster Bay Fire, for example, which serves all the way down to the end of York Road. And they might be, might be interesting to compare and contrast costs for those things if they have any availability after they're finished with the Merville Fire Hall and the Mount Washington. They've already trained all the firefighters. Oyster River has trained Merville and Mount Washington, and they're going to be building a new hall in Merville. I think they're going to an alternate approval process on it very soon. So that's happening.
Okay, so what was your question, Director Lee?
Well, I would like to be part of the discussions and at least hear what's being discussed regarding RED's, RED's role in this. And I'd also like to not be limited to Campbell River. I'd like us to look at the possibility of extending Black Creek Oyster Bay into Northern RED, if that's possible.
Okay, I'll go CAO.
So if I can, Mr. Chair, in summary, the Fire Services Review Report says that the level of service we're being provided by Campbell River and RED is excellent, and the cost is excellent as well. We basically couldn't provide that level of service for the same amount of cost. So we're getting great service and we're getting great value. So the only thing that came out of the recommendation was that the agreement is quite old and it could do with some updating. That provided some more input from Area D in there. And so the recommendation here is that the board support a motion that we engage in talks with Campbell River to find a way to, for the regional district to participate in an updated contract negotiation. I think it's highly inappropriate if the area director would be part of the contract negotiations, but if the board feels that would be appropriate, a motion would have to be forthcoming.
I wasn't suggesting that. I was just suggesting that I need to be apprised of whatever, cost increases might be contemplated. I do appreciate the Campbell River Fire Service. I think they have been providing excellent service to date. So I just want to have input into the way my taxpayer funds are being used in the future, if there's any changes to that proposed to that contract.
And that information, Director Lee, will come in the report.
Yeah, but before the report gets ratified by the board, I'd like to have a little bit of leeway to look into alternatives if the report is not favorable to Area D.
So if I can, Mr. Chair, what would happen here theoretically is the board would pass this motion. I would engage with Campbell River in discussions in an updated contract, and all contracts would come to the board for ratification. So maybe that new contract says that, we would form a committee to provide input to Campbell River on a 10-year plan, let's say. So anything that would change the terms of that contract and identify opportunities for input would come back to the board.
Okay, thank you.
Could I ask one more quickly? Are mutual aid agreements included in that contract? Like mutual aid from Black Creek Oyster Bay to Campbell River or vice versa?
I think Tom may know. I don't know specifically. The contract is very, very old and very, very short and very vague.
Mr. Chairman,
Okay.
there's currently no provision in that old contract for any kind of mutual aid. First of all, the contract is between the regional district and the city of Campbell River. The regional district does not have any assets other than what those are provided under contract from the city. So we don't really have anything to offer in the way of mutual aid. So I think that contract was done up well before there was any consideration of other assets being part of this arrangement.
Okay. Good enough?
Yeah, good enough.
Okay, thank you. Don't see other hands up, so I'll call question on the motions. Anyone opposed? Seeing none, carried. Item 7, COVID-19 Safe Restart Grant for Local Governments. Motion to receive the report.
Move receipt.
Move receipt.
Director Lee, Director Evans, the CAO.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mike will speak to this for us.
Hello, thanks. Most of the information should be in the report, but aside from the gardens, most of the operations at the SRD have kind of returned to a new level of normal. We're not seeing a lot of new surprises specifically associated with COVID recovery efforts. Generally speaking, we're pretty well adapted here. Maybe aside from IT, who's still dealing with a lot of impacts, but we still think we can make some structural improvements to the building to better accommodate staff and delivery. The number one issue today is still the indoor recreation. It remains a significant challenge, and we're still getting guided by incoming policy from senior government. We're not going to be surprised to see that continue on as we head into the regular flu season with COVID and all its variants persisting. From a financials perspective, the gardens is seeing generally higher costs that you associate with holding a large number of people in the same space. And we also continue to keep focused on catching up on a lot of repair and maintenance issues. At a high level, the new cost we're seeing there is security and screening, staff health and safety planning, and scheduling issues associated with coordinating high levels of staff. The most significant financial impact we're seeing are lower user fees coming from guests and patrons, just because there's a lower capacity that the building can handle under the new restrictions. There's a lot of fixed costs associated with hosting events and programs, so anytime attendance is limited, it could have a significant impact on profitability. User fee revenue for the current year has moderately recovered from the low levels seen in 2020, but we're still anticipating to come in at approximately half of our pre-pandemic levels. Looking towards 2022, we anticipate to keep seeing recovery, but we're still anticipating only return about two-thirds of normal user fee revenues. So if we got 2/3, that's still a decrease of about $480,000 per year. The amount getting proposed to be allocated to the gardens is about 5 to 6% of their current preliminary operating budget, not including any capital reserve transfers. I think most of the other information is in the report, so please feel free to ask any questions. Thanks.
Sorry, Mr. Leach.
So thank you, Mr. Chair. So just a high-level reminder, all local governments received 2 doses of, no pun intended there, of COVID funding, and with a number of caveats to them about what that money could be allocated to, specifically to assist with financial impacts that COVID's brought. The first phase we brought to the board, and they endorsed the recommendation to distribute it to a variety of areas within the regional district that met the criteria, and therefore there really wasn't a whole lot left outside of recreation to allocate it. So we've broken down the final remaining funds that were unallocated with a recommendation as you've seen here before you.
Thank you. And Director Anderson.
Thank you. A question and then perhaps another one or comment. So on the top of page 2, it speaks overall operations impacted by the pandemic. They talk about really the need for the gardens, and then it says in recognition of the above challenges, it's proposed that we do three things, and there's 3 bullets there: direct expenses, capital improvements, and IT. And then when you go down to the recommended allocations, it seems like there's those 3 things: the corporate information technology and direct labor, which make up 70, and change. And then the bulk of the recommendation, 372,000, is to the gardens. But am I missing a narrative above as to why the bulk of that second allocation is also recommended to go to the gardens?
Well, the bulk of the money is to go to the gardens. I mean, what we have, there was some criteria that came along with the funding that the money had to be allocated to areas that were impacted financially by that. So if you remember, when we brought back a recommendation previously in the first allotment of funds, that we allocated some money to parks and signage and a number of other things. And then a second wave of money came, and again, we searched all impacts of the entire regional district of, what would fit that criteria and who would need it most. So the real significant impact is on the gardens. And so we spread the wealth to where it fits anywhere outside the garden, and with the remainder going there, impacting, the bullets that we have at Strathcona Gardens, that being some IT improvements, some capital improvements. So we've kind of lumped just the remainder of the funding into Strathcona Gardens because there's more need financially for the gardens than we received. So, really what we did was look at the needs in the other areas outside of the gardens, allocated the money that we could, and basically recommending putting the remainder of the funding straight to the garden, as they have numerous needs that would exceed the funds we received.
So I do understand that, and I do remember the first round of discussions. My question was I missing a narrative, which you've certainly given verbally, Mr. Leach, but I'm wondering if I missed something in writing. It sounds like not. So then my comment is I completely understand that the gardens has been by far the biggest impacted service. I do know, although I do struggle giving, almost $600,000 of $700,000 to one particular service that only 2 of our many communities participate in, and that a lot of the other communities don't participate in, even practically, let alone financially. And I do know, for instance, and I've not looked into this across the district, but I do know that there was a request, for example, from the fire department on Cortez for some COVID funds because their cleaning requirements for their turnout gear was so much more onerous, and they were needing to send them off on a regular basis. I don't know the details, but I'm just concerned that almost all of these funds are going to one particular thing and then a little bit to our corporate office, but are not landing in the communities and the services that we're delivering in the communities apart from the garden. So I just find it a hard one to swallow. I would have loved a little bit more, offering of the kinds of other things that these funds could have been awarded to in our respective communities, and then given the board some choice. Because at this point, I feel like I have a yes/no choice as opposed to an informed choice. And that's tricky.
Well, if I can respond to that, Mr. Chair, the funds are really geared to areas that have received a significant financial impact, and those that are receiving their service delivery. And so, I'd humbly suggest that there are limitations on the funds that we provided the board for in the first wave. And I think we explained to them it isn't really across the board because there's so many things that don't qualify it. So I think the funds are geared towards things like recreation services mostly, and the service industry. So again, there may not seem like a distribution of wealth throughout there, but again, there's not eligibility for everything. And the gardens, being the largest single budget that we have, has suffered a greater need than what the money is being offered to. So, this isn't to say that 80-90% of this money is going to bring the gardens back to flush. It's to help, but it doesn't bring us back to level water.
Okay, thank you. I'll move on to Director Mogul.
Thanks, and I guess I want to reiterate what our CEO just said. These monies, these restart monies, are to try to get local governments back to where they were pre-COVID in terms of revenue losses. And that's the purpose of the funding. It's not to award monies to different localities. I mean, the city received significant funding from the COVID restart, and the main losses in the city, of course, were in the recreation, because recreation was closed and or very limited. So it lost a significant amount of revenue. And the other area we lost significant revenue was the airport. So that's where we earmarked most of well, we haven't earmarked all of the funding, but what we have so far. So it's really important to note that these restart monies are not just monies that can be used for anything. They're quite limited, and they should be limited. The whole point of this is to try and buffer the losses, the real losses. And so in the context of the regional district, the big loss or the revenue losses at Strathcona Gardens and how that has to be replenished. So I totally support the recommendations of staff. I'm sure they've done a significant analysis of how best to use these funds. So thank you.
Cool. And I have Director Evans.
Thank you, Chair, and I thank you to Strathcona Gardens for how they have leveraged the restricted funds again that were brought forward specifically to adjust the loss of revenue and the requirements from COVID in order to continue to operate Strathcona Gardens. I think staff have done an excellent job of identifying how these COVID funds can be used not only to offset lost revenue, but to ensure that the facility meets the needs of the province's restrictions around public facilities and how we can continue to operate Strathcona Gardens to be able to ensure that there is continued use by the communities that use gardens and have keeping our clients safe. So I just want to say, I think that absolutely this is the appropriate use of these funds. All of the unallocated fund that have been identified, I fully support what staff are recommending. And I just want to commend the garden staff for leveraging again the funds to date that have been used, and I fully support this second allocation. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Evans. And Director Davis.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I just wanted a clarification. I want to make sure I'm not missing something. So I guess this is through the CAO. Does this funding stream go particularly to regional district operations and has nothing to do with municipalities? Like, we do not qualify for this particular funding that the regional district has received?
You do, except you also got funding. As you heard Director Moglov speak to, the municipalities got their funding and they directed it towards their recreation and airport mainly. So Tassis also received funding. So it would seem kind of a little bit odd for, let's say, to make a contribution from the regional district's COVID funding to Tassis where you have it. So everyone was given their funding to allocate, and you've had yours. And so we've internalized it, looking at the regional district. We receive funding for this. We look at the criteria, the eligibility, and recommend a distribution.
Right. Okay, thanks.
Okay. I don't see any further questions. So on receipt, I'll call questions. Anyone opposed? Seen none, carried. And move item B, remaining COVID-19 grant funds be allocated according to September 22nd, 2021 report from the CAO.
So moved.
Move B, Evans.
Director Lee and Director Evans, thank you. Any further discussion? Call questions. Anyone opposed? Carried. Item 8, Supreme Court petition.
Chair, I'm not sure how I recuse myself in an open meeting. Might I suggest we do this as the last item and I'll just leave early?
Yeah, that's fine.
Thank you.
Make sure you remind me, Tom. Okay, we'll go on to bylaws then. Bylaw 9495 OCP zoning bylaw amendments, a whole bunch of numbers and letters. Shelnick, motion receive report from the CEO.
Move receipt.
Motion to receive, Abram.
That was Lee and Abram, thank you, and the CEO.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I do believe the director may have a motion.
Yes, I have an alternative motion.
Okay. After receipt?
That will, after receipt.
Okay, thank you. So I have nothing on receipt. I'll call question. Is anyone opposed? Seeing none, carried. And Director Abram.
Okay, so due to the extreme rise in COVID cases, generally around 600 to 800 per day, And actually 4 cases, 4 families on Quadra Island alone, compared to 100 last year provincially. I would suggest that we move this hearing to after the new year in the hope that the COVID crisis will have abated somewhat. Our community center does not have the space to accommodate people using social distancing. And each of the 3 directors that would be eligible to attend this hearing are in the high risk category.
Okay, hang on, let's get the motion on the
and
floor,
really should
please.
not be.
Yeah, let's get the motion on the floor first.
It was like 3 words away, Brad. Okay, so they wouldn't attend. The motion is that staff schedule public hearing dates in January 2022 for, in this case, for the Shellink OCP and zoning amendment applications due to current public health risks associated with COVID-19.
Okay, thank
So
you.
the motion that there includes one that's later.
Okay, so you have them both under one, okay. So do I have a seconder?
Second.
Second, Director
Change.
Wally.
It's just the one.
Okay. So Director Abram and Director Wally, is there any further discussion? Director Anderson?
Yes.
Yeah, it's been almost 2 years. We haven't been doing our public business, and we have put this off so many times. I just can't support doing it again. We've got really good health orders to keep people as safe as possible. It could be a mixed in-person and electronic. All 3 directors could participate that way. Anybody else could. It still gives the option for people to come in person. There's vaccine passports. Like, there's no indication at all that January will be any better or March would be any better than that. And I'm just not comfortable delaying indefinitely.
Thank you. Director Davis?
So, sorry, I just didn't put my hand down.
Okay, thank you. So then I've got Director Abram.
Yes, thank you. As far as the electronic part goes, as everyone knows, our internet is still terrible. We're waiting for coastal, the community connection to come through. And once that happens, then, you know, we'll be able to do city service on Quadra Island. But at this time, it's impossible to do a virtual meeting. We've tried it. It doesn't work very well. It works okay for some people, but when we have a highly contentious issue such as this one, and we have another one coming up, it would be very unwise for us to not give everybody, like it says in our script, at the very beginning of our public hearings, that anybody that feels that they have an interest in property must be heard. And so far, I've gotten nothing but input from the public saying that, first of all, they won't go to a public meeting right now because of the dangers. And secondly, they cannot attend a virtual public hearing because they don't have the infrastructure needed. So, you know, it's part of our duty as a director to make sure that everybody can be heard. And that's what I'm trying to do here. And hopefully by January, with the new orders, I don't know if everybody saw the new orders from Trudeau today, but they should go a long ways to getting this plague stopped, or at least slowed down to the point where we can feel comfortable, or maybe come up with, you know, something in the way of virtual if we get our virtual reality created. But the present time, I stand by the public hearing dates being set later in the new year.
Okay, thank you. I don't see any further discussion. So it was just pointed out to me by Mr. Yates that we still have to deal with B, C, and D no matter what. So if it doesn't matter, Tom?
Mr. Chairman, the board could deal right now, if it wished, with the scheduling for public hearing, but from a staff perspective, B, C, D, and E will still have to come back to the board for an actual date is set and the public hearing wheels are put in motion.
Okay, so saying that, your motion right now, Director Abram, I'm just gonna put on hold. We're gonna go to B, C, and D, and E first, and then we'll come back to that one, okay? Okay, so,
Mr. Chair, just one comment if I could. If we deal with B, C, D, E, et cetera, then, you know, basically they would have to be defeated or not defeated in order to get to the one we want. And I'm not asking that they be defeated. I'm asking that they be deferred until this public hearing can take place in January. So I would respectfully disagree with our corporate officer and say that, you know, I did say that I had an alternative motion to go in between A and B. And the alternative motion is that staff schedule public hearing dates in January,
okay,
et cetera.
okay, I'm gonna go Mr. Yates.
So I would like
So, Mr. Chairman, I apologize if I wasn't clear, but B, C, D, and E are changes being proposed by staff at the board's direction, which was given, I believe, last year sometime, to bring these bylaws up to date. Because they are so many years old, they refer to incorrect references within the Local Government Act, for example. So they're really to deal with updates, I believe, that the board wanted to have placed into these bylaws before we get to a public hearing. Again, if I'm wrong, then perhaps the Director of Planning could correct me, but I believe that is where we've been for quite a while now with B, C, D, and E.
And Mr. Chair, what I would like to do, if I could, please, is defer B, C, D, E, F until we are ready to set the date in January of 2022.
Do I have a second for a defer motion?
Second.
So then everything is deferred. Okay,
I think, Mr. Chair, if we vote on this motion that's before us, the following, if they're deferred, will just show back up at the time of public hearing dates.
okay.
So can I
That was my
ask,
wish.
can I ask a question of clarification?
Go ahead.
It seems that if we defer everything until January, then this will come back to us in January and we'll be scheduling potentially dates in February versus Director Abrams' request here that we schedule hearing dates in January, be booking the halls associated with, at which point, if we pass these either now or in November, wouldn't make any difference, but we'd be ready for January. Which is the will, please? Because they land differently.
If I may, Mr. Chair?
Hang on, I'm gonna go Mr. Yates first.
Mr. Chairman, I'm making the assumption that the motion put forward earlier by Director Abram to schedule public hearing dates in January would mean that staff would basically be starting to set those dates or to look at potential dates sometime in November to confirm availability of venues and availability of directors perhaps, and ensure that everything is ready. Then we'd also have to accommodate bylaws coming back to the board for possible amendment per B, C, D, and E before the board approves an actual date. So again, I'm just conjecturing on what that means, but certainly if this doesn't come back to the board until January, then we'd be looking probably at February or March to actually hold public hearings, which is, of course, the board's choice.
And that's what I'm just trying to get clear, because putting forward Director Abrams' motion or deferring them land us a couple of months apart. So I'm wondering what the wish of the director is.
Point of order, my
Commissioner-
hand's been up for a while.
Director Mogul?
Thank you. So I will not be supporting deferring B, C, D, and E, and I think it's the 4. They are simple amendments so that the correct wording of a bylaw will be on the table when it goes to public hearing. They are housekeeping matters. There's no point in deferring a housekeeping matter to amend the actual wording of the bylaw that needs to be brought up to date because they're so old. Because all it will serve to do is continue to postpone the public hearing. So there's no reason whatsoever that I can think of that we need to defer B, C, D, and E. They are housekeeping, and we have to get the correct wording of the bylaw in front of the public at the appropriate time, even if it is delayed till January, the public hearing.
Okay, thank you.
Point of order, Mr. Chair.
Director Wally?
Yeah, I can't see the agenda, so I don't know. So is this electoral areas only on a deferral or not?
Yes, it would be.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm gonna call question on deferral.
So could we call the question?
Questions on deferral. Those opposed?
Anderson,
Deferral motion is carried. Back to the motion from Director Abram. Discuss that staff schedule a public hearing in January. Call questions. Anyone opposed?
opposed.
Right, Director Anderson, thank you. See no other, carried. Go. Item 2, bylaw 385 zoning bylaw amendment. Wilson, motion received the
Move receipt.
report.
Move
Second.
receipt.
Move receipt.
Wally and Abram, thank you, and CEO.
Nothing to add, Mr. Chair.
Cool. On receipt, I'll call questions. Anyone opposed? Seeing none, carried. On item B, the public hearing to consider bylaw 385 be scheduled for 7 p.m. Wednesday, November 24th, Quadra Island Community Center in Quadra Island. And the holding of the public hearing be delegated by directors of A, C, and D, with the directors of A and C, with area C and electoral area, another one to be designated by the chair and vice chair. Do I have a motion?
Okay, I'll move. I'd like to move a motion, but I'd like actually this motion to talk about it being done electronically because this particular item and the one to follow, Wilson and Chan, neither of them have received any input whatsoever for or against. And there is no reason why we cannot just move forward virtually and not have to put ourselves at risk in the hall or ask people to come to the hall to put themselves at risk.
So
If
do
you
you
want
have,
to do that, that's fine.
so do you have a motion other than what's on in the agenda, item B?
Just that the only thing would be is to delete the at the Quadra Island Community Center on Quadra Island.
And how are you gonna hold the meeting?
Maybe, Mr.
It says
Chair,
it.
I think
It
if,
says it at the bottom.
yeah, I think I'm understanding Director Abram after the date, is he happy with then just putting, instead of at Quadra Island Community Center, held virtually?
That would be fine.
Held virtually. Okay, so your motion will be just be that the public hearing to consider bylaw 385 be scheduled for 7 p.m. Wednesday, November 24th, held virtually,
Correct.
and then carry on with the other part.
Yeah, naming of the directors and all that.
Okay. Mr. Yates.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So if the response is in the affirmative and the first paragraph in B is changed to read virtually only, Then I believe the last paragraph will also have to be changed because it does currently state to allow both in-person or electronic attendance by the public and directors. So if you're not going to permit in-person attendance because there's no physical place for the public to attend, then you would have to delete the in-person allowance as part of that as well, I believe. Thank you.
Okay, you
And
follow that, Director Abram?
I would be fine with Tom's advice. So
Okay,
basically just deleting 2 words in person.
okay. And your electoral area C, and who's the other electoral area director designate for the chair and the vice chair?
Area D.
C and D? Okay. So, is everybody clear with the motion? It's electoral area only?
Can I just ask something? It's Director Lee.
Go ahead.
I just feel uncomfortable myself about making it virtual only because not everybody on Quadra Island would own a device that they could connect with. Maybe, and my experience of these virtual public meetings are that they're disastrous on the islands. People don't have good connections, not even good phone connections. And people that want to come to a public hearing and make their views known, they should be able to come if we have a couple staff that are masked and vaxxed and in the hall. And if somebody is healthy and they are following all the public health orders and distancing, they should be able to come to the hall and give their input. And if it's true that there's only 4 or 5 people that have responded to this at all, maybe we should be looking at waiving the public hearing altogether, like just deal with it without going to public hearing. We're able to do that. Those are just some options, but I think the public needs to, if they have interest in the topic, they should be able to, they should have access to in-person if they want to go to in-person. The directors won't be there because we're all immune compromised, but maybe the staff could be there.
Okay, thank you.
Just gonna jump in there quickly that we don't have the option to waive the Wilson or Chan public hearing.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. And I do find it strange that the previous bylaw, you don't want to have an in-person one, you can't have it virtually because of bad connections on Quadra Island, but now you're gonna have one on Quadra Island virtually. I'm a little confused there.
I was just going to ask the question that would answer your query. I'd have to ask this to Dave or John or somebody from IT. It seems to me that on our Zoom meeting emails that we get a link that we can go to so we can attend on our computers, but there is also a phone number that people can call. Okay, so if that's the case, then could we just make it so that people can call in as a conference call and state their views?
Yes.
And nobody would have to be there.
Okay. Okay, so you got a motion on the floor. I'm gonna call question. Electoral areas only. All in favor or anyone opposed?
Yeah, Anderson opposed.
Anyone else opposed? Hearing none, carried. Item 3.
It should all, Mr. Chair, could I just add, it should also be mentioned, since we're being recorded and listened to, that people can do it the old-fashioned way and write a snail mail letter to the planning department with their views on this public hearing. So they can write in before the deadline of the close of the public hearing. So that's another option.
Okay, thank you. Item 3, bylaw 424, zoning amendment bylaw. Chan, motion to see the report.
Receipt, Abram.
Second.
Abram Wally. Anything to add, CEO?
Nothing to add, but I'm assuming the director is going to make similar changes.
Okay, call question
Yeah,
on receipt.
uh,
Anyone opposed
Okay.
receipt? Seen none carried. Director Abram?
Yes, Mr. Chair, just the same as the last one. Call in, conference call,
Okay,
and leave it at that. And the date would be fine. We could do it right after the other one. And it would be director for Area D once again.
thank you. Do I have a seconder?
Second.
Dr. Wally, thank you. Any discussion?
Mr. Chair, I was just remembering, I'm scheduled for eye surgeries coming up pretty quick and possibly, and just wondering if I should be the vice chair for these hearings, because if I get called up on the waiting list, I'm going to get my eyes fixed.
I guess
You know, I don't know. I don't know when that's going to be.
I'll go to the CEO.
I'm going.
Okay, I'll go CEO. Tom, what would be the protocol then?
Mr. Chairman, I believe if there's a third director in attendance, they could be appointed as a vice chair pro tem if necessary. If we're talking about the chair being absent and the vice chair also being absent, then we're talking about the third director and possibly alternate directors. Clearly, there cannot be just one director representing all of the electoral areas under this motion. So in that event, I guess we would have to look at whether it's possible and feasible to continue with the public hearing or cancel it, depending on the circumstance. But right now, I don't have an answer for basically a what-if scenario.
But there's
Okay,
there's scenarios in place if you can't.
Yeah, and I'm seeing, I'm having a consultation tomorrow, a second appointment, and I might get a clearer idea of when the operation's going to take place.
Okay.
So it could be a year from now.
Okay.
The waiting list is long, so maybe just leave me there and we'll deal with it if it comes up. You know, Director Wally's going to be around. He
Okay.
can sub in for me.
Okay, thank you. Call question on the motion. Is anyone opposed? Seeing none carried. Item 4, bylaw 431, Black Creek Oyster Bay water meter replacement. Motion to see the report.
Move receipt.
Director
Second.
Lee, Director Wally, second. CEO, anything to add?
Nothing to add, Mr. Chair.
Okay, on receipt, I'll call questions. Anyone opposed? Seeing none carried. And item B, the bylaw 431, being a bylaw to authorize entering into an agreement respecting use of the community works funds for the Black Creek Oyster Bay Community Water System, now be introduced and read for the first time.
Move first reading.
Director Lee,
Second.
Director Wally. Any discussion? Seeing none, I'll call questions. Anyone opposed? Seeing none carried. Item C.
Move second and third.
Second.
Thank you. Lee and Wally. Call questions. Anyone opposed? Carried. Item D, Director Kerr. Second by
Wally.
Director Wally. Any discussion? Seeing none, call question. Anyone opposed? Carried. Item 5, bylaw 432, 433, OCP zoning bylaw amendment for Quadra Links. Motion to see the report.
Move receipt.
Director Lee, second by Director Abram. On receipt, call questions. Anyone opposed? See none carried.
Subsequent motion
Director Abram,
prior to B. Okay, so this is basically the same verbiage as I had in the previous one for Shelley. I'm not going to go through all the reasons about COVID and the crisis we're in, but I would move that staff schedule a public hearing
in
for
January.
dates in January 2020. Pardon me? Yeah,
Yep.
January 22 for this particular application,
Do I have a seconder?
as it's printed on.
Second.
Director Lee, thank you. Any further discussion? Director Anderson?
Just echoing the chair's comments, I'm super uncomfortable with the differing application of moving to public hearing or not based on I don't know what other than public interest. It just doesn't feel like a fair application of justice.
Thank you. Don't see any further discussion. I'll call questions. Anyone opposed? Seeing none, carried. Item 6, bylaw 434, 435, zoning bylaw amendment for Treat Home. Motion received
Move
for
receipt
report.
of the report.
Yeah, I think that was Anderson, second. Do I have a seconder?
Second.
Director Wally, CO.
Nothing to add, Mr. Chair.
Okay, on receipt on the report, I'll call questions. Anyone opposed? Seen none, carried. Item B, bylaw 434 being a bylaw to amend Cortez Island OCP, now being introduced for the first time.
Move B, Anderson.
Okay, seconder,
Second.
Wally. Any discussion?
I have a question for staff.
Go ahead.
Thank you. Not to belabor it too much, but we at EASC have had discussions around public trail access and have had discussions with the applicant and staff thought they might be able to provide an update by the time it came to board. Just if there is anything, I'd appreciate it.
CO.
Aniko? You're muted.
Thank you through the chair to the board. Staff is continuing to work with the applicants on the proposed trail access and should have confirmation of that shortly. I just don't have that available for today, but it will be ready for the public hearing.
That's great. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Director Abram, do you have your hand up or is that previous?
Yes, it's new.
Go ahead.
I'm just wondering if staff can tell me if this was the only date that was available, because I can't make it on the 25th. I won't be here.
There's no date on this one, Director Abram.
Is this what, Freedom? Freedom? Yep, it's a date, Monday, October 25th at 1 p.m.
Okay, we're still on B though.
Oh, okay, I see what you mean. There's
Yep.
nothing in that
No,
particular
nothing in
one.
this one.
So
Sorry.
I'll hold my comments
Okay,
till we get that.
sounds good. On B, I'll call questions. Anyone opposed?
I'm opposed because I don't want to attend a public hearing in the evening on Cortez Island because we normally have our public hearings on Saturdays, plus COVID. I don't want to go into one of those small halls and mix and mingle with people that I don't know. It's too early. We're in the middle of this fourth wave and I don't feel comfortable. I think this should be put off.
It's just the first reading, Director.
Yeah, but when we get down to
Well, when
D,
we
or
get down to it,
whatever.
we'll talk to it when we
It's-
get, we'll talk to it when we get there.
Okay, I see, okay.
Joe? On B. Call questions. Anyone opposed? Seeing none, carried. On to C, bylaw 434 be given second reading.
So moved.
Director Anderson. Director Wally, second. Thank you. Any discussion? I'll call questions. Anyone opposed? See none, carried. Item D, bylaw 435 be giving, bylaw B, being a bylaw to amend zoning regulations, application Cortez Island, be now introduced and read for the first time.
So moved.
Director Anderson, second. Director Lee, did you second it?
I second it.
Director Wally, thank
Second.
you. Any discussion? Seeing none, call questions. Anyone opposed? Seeing none, carried. That bylaw 435 be given second reading.
So moved.
Director Anderson.
Second.
Director Wally, thank you. Any discussion? Seeing none, I'll call question. Anyone opposed? Carried. Item F, public hearing to be considered bylaw 434, 435 be scheduled for 1 o'clock on Monday, October 25th, 2021, at Manson's Hall in Cortez Island, and the holding a public meeting be delegated to the directors representing the electoral areas and the directors for electoral area B and A, designated as chair and vice chair respectively, and that the public hearing be structured to allow in-person or electronic participation by directors and the public in accordance with the current health regulations.
Move F for discussion.
Anderson moves, seconder,
Second.
Wally, discussion.
And just, thank you. Speaking briefly to it, to address Director Lee's concerns, there would, as stated in the last paragraph, be a joint combo public hearing of in-person and electronic. I wouldn't expect that my fellow directors would come. You could do it from the comfort of your own home, and it is in the afternoon. Public hearings used to be scheduled back in George Cirque's day, often on Saturday, largely, I think almost exclusively in the last 13 years. They haven't been on Saturdays because it doesn't really work for staff. They're usually in the afternoon of a weekday, and that's what this is. I am willing to be there in person. I have been double vaccinated, and I'm happy to be wearing masks, and I expect that most people that can will be doing this from home. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Lee.
I'll pass, thanks.
Thank you. Don't see any further discussion. I'll call question. Anyone opposed?
I had my hand. Mr.
Sorry,
Chair. I have my
Chairman,
hand
go
up.
ahead.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, I just, in answer to my question earlier, does it have to be on the 25th?
That's the date that's,
Or over there a selection of dates?
I'll go to staff.
Thank you. Through the chair to the board, 3 dates were made available to the electoral area director for the area to hold the public hearing as availability for the hall for that week. The dates were the October 25th date, which is provided at 1 o'clock. Also, October 26th at 1 o'clock was an option. And finally, Thursday, the 28th at 1 o'clock was also an option. It was the request of the area director that this date worked best, but I leave it up to the directors to discuss further. Thank you.
And I did indicate that I could make any of those 3.
Okay.
Well, I can make the 28th, but that's it. So if you want to change it, great. If not, I won't be there. It's up to you, Director Anderson.
I would happily amend if that works for the other 2 directors to the 28th.
Okay, friendly amendment to 28th.
Checking with Wally and Lee.
No problem for me.
Can somebody just tell me, because I can't see it, is it 7 p.m. in the recommendation or is it 1 p.m.?
1 p.m.
It looks like 7 in the recommendation to the board.
1 o'clock.
1 o'clock, October 28th.
Correct.
Okay,
Okay,
got it.
friendly amendment. Okay,
Thank
I'll call
you.
question on anyone opposed. Seeing none carried. On to correspondence. How would you like to deal with them?
Move all the correspondence, but pull 2 and 5.
Second.
Okay. Moved and seconded. All in favor? Carried. Item 2, Vancouver Island Library. Director Lee, I'll let you go first.
Okay, this letter's dealing with the annual report, and I'm just wondering if the link worked for people and you actually could get the annual report. If you couldn't, I've got a hard copy that I could get distributed to you. So was the board able to open the link? Because I couldn't.
Yeah, I could.
Anybody want a hard copy of the report? Okay, that's what I wanted to check.
Director Kerr, are you saying you received it? You could open up the big one, sorry. Okay, go ahead, Director Lee.
That was all. I just wanted to know if people got the report and if they would like a copy if they couldn't open the link.
Okay. 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 So sorry, yeah, so first off, I missed, moving the report. So a motion to receive the Vancouver Island Regional Library report
Move receipt.
by Lee.
Second.
Evans, thank you, and Director Lee, you spoke, and Director Evans.
Chair, did you want me to speak to the media release or just about the annual report?
Oh, sorry, that's on number 6. Sorry.
Yes.
Okay.
So I have nothing further to say about the annual report.
Okay, thank you. No further discussion? Call questions, anyone opposed? Carried. Item 5 was pulled. Motion to receive the report. For the correspondence.
Motion to receive.
Director Abram, second by,
Abram, receive.
need a seconder.
Second.
Director Lee, any discussion?
I have something to say about it.
Go ahead.
I feel that this letter is very disrespectful of our director, one of our directors, and it is quite wrong-minded in that Sean Koopman does not represent our regional district. Our directors do represent their areas and the regional district, and Chief Clendenning should be made aware of that. And her criticisms are unwarranted, in my opinion. Director Abrams doing an awesome job of navigating a very complicated electoral area with lots of services. And a letter of this sort does nothing but harm the services at regional district.
Okay, thank
And
you.
the public perception of them. And I would expect more from a fire chief.
Thank you. Director Davis.
Sorry, it's just another note. I just noticed in the chat that Director Colburn had asked to pull one, so I'm not sure what happened there.
I got it. I'll add it. Thanks.
Thank you.
Anything else on item 5? Seeing none, I'll call questions. Anyone opposed? Carried.
Wally's opposed.
I'm opposed. I don't think we should receive like derogatory, defamatory letters.
Thank you. So opposed is Director Lee and Director Wally. Thank you. Carried. Item 6, Campbell River Library Project. Motion to receive the report.
Move receipt.
Director Evans, second by
Davis.
Director Davis, thank you. And Director Evans.
Thank you, Chair. And the media release itself is attached to this agenda item, but just really quickly to say that at the September 25th board meeting, it was decided by the Borough Board that they would put a pause on all capital projects for a year. And certainly the Campbell River Library was one of those. And the decision was made just based on the current market conditions, the construction industry, the construction costs and labor costs really just precluded the board moving forward with any further projects. So when that was put on hold, the Campbell River Library will now be on a month-to-month lease. And during this next year, the Borough Board, in consultation with the community and stakeholders, will be just pursuing what options are available to come up with the best decision for a library in Campbell River. And certainly, we will keep you apprised of any updates that take place. And finally, just to make a note that the new Executive Director, Ben Hyman, I'm sure he has made it open to also, if he was invited as a guest, he'd be happy to come and speak. So that's just maybe something for consideration in the future.
Okay, thank you very much, Director. Anything to add, Directors?
Yes, I might as well jump I might as well jump in here because this, I didn't get this item 6 on when I printed out my agenda a few days ago, so it must be new. But anyway, I would just like to say that Director Evans and I both sit on the library executive. There was a really serious discussion all summer regarding the Campbell River project, trying to find any way possible to build the library that we could within budget. But unfortunately, the information we were getting back from the construction and industry and the costs were $5 to $6 million over what we had budgeted for to deliver the new Campbell River Library, and we just could not proceed further without re-examining our options. And we're going to be doing that. So Trustee Evans, Director Evans and I were in full agreement that this is a good idea to just pause for a year and see if the prices come down, see what the situation is a year from now, and take a good hard look at it. And I'm very supportive of having a new library in Campbell River. I'm probably one of the most frequent visitors to that library on our board. Once a week I'm in there. And I know it has its problems. I know we have a roof leak going on in the front meeting room, and the washroom leaves a lot to be desired, but you know, we can stay put for the next 12 months there. And the other thing I wanted to report to the board was that we passed our annual budget at the September 25th meeting, and the total budget increase, average budget increase was 3.84%. And that will affect the electoral areas that I represent on the Strathcona board with an approximate 2.5% increase. So some areas, because the library levies are based half on assessments and half on population of the community, some areas are going up and down quite dramatically, but most of them are in the 1 to 5% range. So so that's where it sits right now. I think the board was just sticking on the 3.87, which is almost inflationary, you know, covering inflation.
Okay, Director, you're way
So
off.
that's it.
You're way off the library project. Like,
No, it's part of that because it changed the amounts.
it's got
It
nothing
did
to do.
change the budget amounts.
Your
It's
budget.
done now.
Your budget has got nothing to do with the library project. Okay.
Okay, well, I would have presented it under new business, but I just presented it now because it relates to the libraries. That's all.
You had an item
So-
two. Item 2 was Vancouver Island Regional Library. You could have done it there, but that's fine. You're done now. Let's move on. Is there anything else on the library project? Hearing none, I'll call questions. Anyone opposed? Seeing none, carried. I'm going to go back to up to item 1 because in chat, I had 2 directors ask for it to be pulled and I didn't see till afterwards. So rebuilding the village of Lytton, I'd like the motion to receive the correspondence.
So moved.
Davis?
Receipt.
Davis and Colburn, thank you. And any discussion? Director Colburn.
I just wanted to highlight this piece of correspondence, especially from the position of the village of Zabalas. But for the powers that be, the village of Zabalas could be in this very same situation from our 2018 fire. And so just hands up to Mount Waddington, I mean, for going about it this way. I think that it's a fantastic challenge, and it is a challenge to other municipalities and regional districts to do this. We, of course, the village of Zabalas, are such a small contributor to this based on our population So what we essentially did was take in the population of the valley and contribute in that way. But I just wanted it to be on here for discussion if there was any desire from the regional district itself to make such a contribution. I've been trying to do the math. I'm not good at it at all. And so with 44,000 some odd people, I don't know what the contribution would be. If you take the municipality's population out of the Strathcona Regional District population pool. But I would just offer that up for discussion to support the Village of Linton and its catastrophic loss. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Davis.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I also support the concept of making a donation to the Village of Linton. And I'd like to ask staff what sort of dollar amount would that be if we were to base it on our population at $1 per person? Thank you.
Go to staff.
Well, I think Tom can do that. We just did an AAP, so Tom probably has a accurate number.
Well, I think we're talking in the mid 40,000s. The only question I would have is under what authority the board would have. It wouldn't be under grants, and I don't think it would fit a grant and aid. So I think that would have to be looked into a bit to see under what authority the board could actually do this. But in terms of the amount, based on the formula, I think we're talking about 44, 45,000 population in total for the region.
Okay. Thanks for that.
Okay, Director Lee.
I'd like to refer this back to our emergency services coordinator to tell us exactly how much aid has already been given to Lytton through BC Emergency Program, through the Canadian Red Cross, and through the governments, because the provincial government would be the main responder to the needs of Lytton. Also the insurance companies that have insured these structures, they'll be dealing with the financial losses as well. So I think it's a little premature for us to jump in, and we don't have a function anyway, but to jump in and sail money over to them, they may not even need it. They may be getting it from other sources. So I would like a report back from our emergency services staff.
Okay, so just hang tough until we're finished the conversation, then I'll ask for a subsequent. Director Colburn?
Yeah, thanks for that. And just to be clear, it was, really not my intention. The formula that Mount Waddington has used is with their municipalities taken out, as their municipalities, I believe, are contemplating the part about a donation. As the Village of Zavalis has done. So we've kind of, this is not like a double dipping kind of thing. As I said, it's just a good faith gesture to, recognize the hardships, and it would be up to them how they would use that, whether that would be for community donations, helping homeowners, what that would look like. But I really, it struck me as important, just from personal experience, for how close we could have been in this exact same position. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Baker.
I think Sayward also could be in that position as well. I disagree with Director Lee, and I believe this is something that we should be very seriously looking at. $1 per person to help a community, and it could be any one of our communities. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Moglove.
Thank you. And just for what it's worth, this letter was on our city council agenda on Monday. And what we chose to do with that letter, and this was a motion put forward by Director Cornfield, was that instead of sending money, because we don't really know what the situation is, what we chose to do is to write a letter to the District of Lytton saying, what type of assistance and or help do you need? because it might not be money, it might be something else. So we chose to go in that direction. I don't necessarily think we need a staff report on this, but perhaps a letter to reach out to the District of Lytton saying, you know, we've discussed it at our regional table, and you know, what's your situation? What do you need? So that's how I think that made a lot of sense to me, and I would certainly support doing something like that here as well.
Okay, thank you. I don't see any further discussion. Do I have a subsequent? Oh, motion, sorry, motion or question on receipt? Anyone opposed? Seeing none carried, and do I have a subsequent?
I'm willing to make a motion.
Go ahead, Director Davis.
I would basically move what Director Moglove was saying, that we have direct staff to contact the Village of Lytton to find out what their needs are in light of the fact. Well, sorry, I'll just leave it there.
Okay. I think,
Second.
okay. Director Kerr, second. Thank you. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, I'll call questions. Anyone opposed? Seeing none carried. Okay, down to new business. Director Anderson, you have a report on the paramedic discussion the other day.
Oh, I had forgotten. Okay, collecting thoughts. So back in the spring, we received some correspondence from the Ministry of Health, BC EHS, I don't quite remember, telling us about the shift in rural ambulance stations from a kilo guarantee to a SOC, which would, instead of having a bunch of people on call, there would be, you know, a number of permanent positions. There was some concern around that rollout. We directed for a meeting. We then discussed that again a month or so ago, and the chair and staff organized a meeting with representatives from BC Ambulance, Ministry of Health, VHA, and BC EHS, I think it was. I don't have my notes in front of me. Just 2 days ago. And I was surprised that I was the only rural or only director there, because I know in discussions I'd heard from a number of you outside of the Campbell River area, because this change applies across our entire regional district with the exception of the municipality of Campbell River. Surprised that I was the only director on the call. And when I brought this up at EASC this morning, it came to my attention that Director Wally and Director Abram, who would have liked to have been in attendance, weren't aware of the meeting. By what mechanism, I don't know. So I just wanted to bring this up again here. The chair, our chair, who chaired the meeting, I was under the impression that reps from Tassos and Zabalis were going to be on the call and weren't. So it was very fruitful for me. I'm happy to give the board a bit of an update of content, but perhaps not to belabor it at this moment, but just wondering if we would like to ask for a follow-up meeting. Perhaps the VHA person actually thought it was a different meeting and was happy to stay, but she might not be needed the second time round. But the other reps were really engaged and very useful. So I wonder, over to the rest of you who weren't able to attend, who might have wanted to, do we want to ask the chair to coordinate a follow-up meeting of the same? That's all. Thank you.
Any discussion? Director Colburn.
Yeah, and excuse me for completely dropping the ball on that. I also things have been moving kind of quickly with the situation up here. I think that in the email that went out to the rest of the directors to see if there was a will to be at you know, another meeting or have conversations with BCEHS, that kind of highlight that things have changed up here as well. So I don't know that there's a need. I would have loved to have been on the call yesterday if I would have had it in my calendar. So excuse my not being there. However, we did have multiple conversations with them, the village, with the nations that are on these territories. and also at UBCM. At this point, I'm fairly satisfied, and more importantly, the attendants that work here in Zavalis are sufficiently satisfied. They've still taken a small cut. However, they are all working, and that's fantastic. So that's kind of where I'm at with it. If you'd like me to speak any further to it, I can, but yeah, things have changed definitely for the better. This model way better serves our community that they've got in play now.
Great, thank you. Director Davis?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'm sorry, I missed the beginning of Director Anderson's talk regarding this, but I think I got the gist of it. We did have a meeting with BCEHS during the UBCM period, and certainly changes have been made. We have 4 3/4 full-time positions, 3/4 time positions now in TASIS, and we're very happy with the results and you know what's come from the letter that Director Colburn had chiefly written. So we really appreciate the progress that's been made.
Thank you. Director Baker?
The Village of Sayward would like to be a part of the discussion. So going forward, I would like to see another meeting. I don't believe the Village was invited on the last one, so I would definitely like to be a part of the second one, please.
Okay. Any other comments?
Can I just ask again, what was the gist of this? What is this meeting specifically dealing with?
I could offer a summary if you like, or Chair, you?
Sure, apologies.
Go ahead, Director Anderson.
Yeah, so I mean, this meeting was set up for any of us to attend, but because it was just me there as director, it was entirely sort of Cortez focused, and how the rollout of this provincial program landed here. A little bit of talking about the provincial rollout. So it was way better than it was the beginning of August. Beginning of August, we had 3/4 of our schedule blank, and people were freaking out, understandably. There were certainly some stopgap measures that were made, and we got some more positions, and we had the Kilo Guarantee extended for a few months. But overall, I heard concern from the ambulance attendants that I spoke to in confidence that they were concerned with sort of the overall culture at the ambulance, BCEHS, and not feeling very free to speak freely, and some were actually really moved almost to tears even to just be listened to by me. So that was sort of a concern. But on this particular rollout, there was a desire to have a little bit more flexibility in its implementation, that overall it was understood to be an improvement over what was before across the province, but how it landed on Cortez, there was concern that it wasn't going to be sustainable in the long run because it provided very few people with some stability, but a whole bunch more people who probably wouldn't be available on call in the long run to fill in the gaps because they would have to find work elsewhere. So there was just an interest to have a specific conversation around whether within the collective agreements there could be some more flexibility afforded to Cortez, and there was a commitment by somebody from BCEHS to have a specific conversation with the staff here on island. So I'm satisfied for the time being, but I'm aware that some of you weren't involved, so wanting to give that opportunity to the rest of you.
Okay, thanks for that update.
Okay. Any other discussion?
If I could just say one thing further.
Go ahead.
It's Director Colburn. My main takeaway from all of the meetings that I have had with BCEHS is about the communication of how this was rolled out, how they are, how communities know their communities and are here on the ground, and the people that are working here and are serving these populations know what works best for these communities, and the communication was not there. And so that's been my real ask of them. So if we're talking about, communicating effectively, and things like that, then I do think that it is important to continue conversations with them, and so far receptive, definitely. And I think what really changed things for us here is in environment, the reality of where we are geographically is not a one size fits all for the entire province. So yeah, that was my main ask from them is communication could have been done much more effectively and probably would have cost less money for them and us in the long run if there would have been consultation. So I'd be interested in participating in a further meeting and really, driving that message home. And forgive me for yesterday. Thanks.
Okay, so it seems to me the main question to come out of the meeting the other day is Neil Lilly is going to get hold of staff over there and have a discussion there and then get back to our staff. So on the issues on Cortez Island. So right now I have really Director Baker from Sayward that would be interested to see another meeting. So I would suggest let's see what happens, in the next few weeks from Cortez Island, and if it's another meeting is warranted, we'll have one. Other than that, do we open up another full meeting with everybody? Is it needed? Director Anderson.
What I heard is that at East that Director Wally and Director Abram would have liked to have participated and would like the opportunity. I'm hearing Director Baker and Colburn. And I would certainly participate again and not reiterate all the Cortez stuff, but with Director Colburn speak to the profound lack of communicative capacity. I think that's really worth being there collectively. So what I'm hearing is that there's 3 people for sure who'd like that.
I haven't heard that.
Would have liked to have been part.
I haven't heard that. I've heard Director Baker speak up on Sayward. I'm hearing from Director Colburn that she's happy with what's going on there. She wasn't happy with the communication, and that's something that we discussed in the meeting we had on Monday. So whether she's going to be part of another communication discussion or not. Director Abram.
Yeah, I did say earlier that I was not notified and I would have liked to, and I did reach out to our ambulance people and our paramedics and ask them to get back to me with their concerns because there did seem to be a number of them. They're, of course, they're working for an agency that doesn't necessarily like them to go out and be public with their comments. So I'm waiting to hear back from them before I can say anything about what they think about it. So until then, I'd be interested in the meeting, but I want to have that information.
Okay, Director Wally.
Yeah, myself as well. I had indicated that the electoral areas that I didn't do it again here, but I would like to be in attendance as well.
Okay, so I'm going to add something to this, directors, because the email went out to all of you, each and every one of you, to your SRD account. And it's an SRD account that you guys should all be checking on a regular basis. I know some of you have your personal accounts that information goes out, but the SRD account is also there that you guys all should be checking. So in the future, can you please check your SRD account on a regular basis? Because information does go there. So saying that, I'm hearing that you would like to set up another meeting. So what I need then is some direction. What do you want to talk about?
Well, for one, Sayward, as far as I understand, is not well covered.
Okay, well, Director Baker, is that, so this is what we need to know, what questions do you have for, BCHS ministry and stuff like that? Director Baker. Mark, you there?
He's muted.
Oh, you're muted, Mark.
Sorry.
There you go.
From what I understand, we don't have the coverage that is necessary.
Okay.
So I'll get those numbers and I'll talk to our primary here and I'll send them off to you.
Okay, so what I would suggest then, directors, is what questions you'd like to see discussion happening with BCHS administering that. Let's email them into staff. We'll compile them and we'll set up another meeting. Sound good?
Sounds good. Thank
Okay.
you.
Okay. Okay, I'll take a question on the verbal report from Director Anderson on a paramedic meeting. Motion received.
Move receipt.
Director Wally,
Second.
seconder.
Second, Davis.
Director Davis, thank you. Anyone opposed? Seeing none carried. The last item we have is the Anderson litigation.
I'd like to recuse myself for conflict of interest, please.
Thank you.
Would somebody just text me when you go into in camera and I'll join you then.
Thank you. We will. Okay, I'd like to move the report on Anderson litigation. Motion
So
received.
moved.
Second. I think that was Evans and I didn't hear the second one. Moglove. And I'll go to CAO.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So this is just the written submission of the judgment of Director Anderson we talked about. So I'm not sure if folks have had a chance to read it, but as I listened in, Mr. Yates and our chair, if there's any questions that I can help bring some clarity to in the submissions, I'm happy to answer.
Thank you, CO. Do we have any questions? Seeing none, call question on receipt. Anyone opposed? Carried. Item T, closed session. The report from CO.
Move receipt of CIO's report.
Second by Director Lee, second by Director Colburn. Call questions. Anyone opposed? Seeing none carried. Item B, the closed meeting be held.
Move the closed meeting be held under the sections named in the recommendation.
Director Lee.
Do I have to read them out?
No, it's fine. Director Colburn.
Okay.
Anyone opposed? Carried. Motion to terminate.
So moved.
Director Lee.
Second.
Director Wally. All opposed? Seeing none carried. See you in closed.